All right, everybody, welcome. Hello, long time no see. Welcome to chapter 3 of my FileMaker series. This one is going to be a little bit different. This is kind of away from lighting a little bit and kind of more in the management side of things, but this was something that has been requested a bunch of times, so I figured I might as well put something together for it. I am using some new streaming stuff this time. So if there are any issues with audio, anything like that, please throw them in the chat so that I can fix them. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and jump in and get started. So this week, we're going to basically be creating a simple contract management database. I'm going to be focusing specifically on contracts from United Scenic Artists, but I think that even if you're not a union designer, or designer or technician, a lot of the things that I'll be showing you, you'll be able to use in your own work. So you might have to do a little bit of translating in your head, but I think that the skills that you're going to see and the lessons you're going to learn are going to be super useful. So today specifically, I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction of what FileMaker is. We're going to design what we want our database to be. We'll talk about what a database is. We'll create some tables. We'll define relationships between those tables. We'll create a couple of screen and print layouts. The print layout will be a United Scenic Artist Standard Design Agreement cover sheet and a rider. And you can download the actual cover sheet for that. There's a link in the video description or a link on the class page on my website to that information. So you'll want to have that PDF available to you for this class. Excuse me. And then later this week, we're going to add a couple of other contract types. We're going to look at how we can, click a button to automatically email that or to send that contract to your email client, to email to a producer or even to the union. We're going to look at how we can use the data we've collected to help track your health insurance contributions, your pension contributions, track how much you're going to have to pay in dues each quarter. Even tracking down to how many costumes did you design this year, or how many days did you spend in residence at a theater company. And those kinds of things are where having this database becomes super, super valuable and super useful over necessarily having a spreadsheet, or obviously over having just like a folder full of all of your PDFs. We'll be able to have all of that information in a centralized location and be able to reference it and create reports, create layouts and stuff like that that can be useful for us. And then, we'll see wherever else this week takes us. I have a rough outline for the next 3 days, but if, as we're going through, if we discover something else that could be useful, if you, people out there viewing, if you see something, you're like, wait, I wish we could cover this a little bit more, put it in the chat. Let's talk about it. I'm always flexible. I'm always willing to adjust the plan. And then of course I can also add more to this chapter. Right now I'm only planning on the 3 videos, but if it's more, then hey, that's great. So again, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. If you can't make a session this week, or if you want to, the cat is ripping things off my wall. Or if you want to go back and view this later, these are all going to stay on my YouTube channel. The same link you followed today to get here, it will be here forever. So feel free to watch it anytime you want. Come back. You don't have to watch them live at all. And then again, like if you have something else, even if it's not related to these classes and you want to learn more, head over to my website, mikewoodld.com/FileMaker, and you'll see there's a form there that will allow you to request any other topic. So I've already got a bunch of those to continue on our previous sessions that we did that were lighting specific. But if you think of anything else that could be useful, please feel free to throw it in that form. And then, of course, everything I do is completely free. If you do feel so inclined to leave a tip or send any cash my way, especially now that we have no gigs, there's some QR codes you can scan there. And really the best thing you can do is come check me out on Instagram, on YouTube, stuff like that. Share the content, share it with students, share it with other designers, and help get the word out there. Okay, so let's jump in. So the first question we have to ask ourselves today is, what is a relational database? We're talking about FileMaker. Dwight, can you stop, please? Hey, come on. It's my receptionist here, Dwight. So we're talking about FileMaker. FileMaker is a relational database tool. It's a way that we can take different sets of data that might relate to one another and reference them against each other to make something more powerful. So simply put, it's a collection of data in multiple tables that correlates to each other in some way. So when we talk about a table, this is what we're talking about. A database is kind of the overall overarching thing. A table is within that database. A table contains multiple records. So in this example I have in the picture here, this was from the previous contest I ran earlier this year, and each one of these lines in the spreadsheet is an individual record. And in each one of those records, you have multiple fields. So a timestamp is a field within a record. Who they voted for was a field within that record. And you can kind of keep scaling that up and up until you can have tons of different fields over millions of records if you wanted to. If you were with me for my... I'm sorry. If you were with me for my lighting paperwork one, you know, we created an instrument record table, and it had everything about a particular light. Channel number, dimmer number, address, etc., etc. Those are all examples of fields. So for today's session, we want to first start thinking about how we want to, what do we need in this database, and how do we want to relate and lay that information out. So the two kind of obvious things to me that we're going to start with is, number one, a contract table. So that's going to be the actual agreements for the actual shows. And then the other thing is a clients table. Because we're going to have, you know, as a working designer, as a working technician, you're going to have multiple clients and also multiple contracts, and those are going to relate to one another in some way. So within our contracts field, we're going to need fields, or excuse me, within our contracts table, we're going to need things like producer name, venue name, show name. Basically anything you can think about that would go into that contract is going to be a field in this particular table. And then on the client side of things, we're going to have things like producer name, venue name, maybe their taxpayer ID number, the name of the person who signs the contract, the email of the person who signs the contract, things like that. And then once we've defined all of those various pieces of data we need, we can look at them and say, all right, what do they have in common? And in our case, the thing that they have in common is probably always just going to be the producer's name. So again, you might have one producer, you might do 5 shows for them in a year on 5 separate contracts. You want to be able to link that same producer, that same client, to all of those different contracts. So that's what we would call in our database a one-to-many relationship. Now there's different kinds of relationships you can have when you're working with databases. You can have one-to-many, you can have one-to-one, you can have many-to-many. But for the purposes of just starting out in FileMaker and just kind of getting your feet wet, this is the simplest, and this is, I think, the most useful for our particular use case. So again, we're going to have a client, in this case YouTube Theater Company, and we're going to have 3 shows, 3 different contracts within that client. Okay, so let's dive in. And I apologize for those of you who have seen the lighting one before. That was kind of a refresher on stuff, but it occurred to me that we'll probably have some people who have never touched FileMaker before doing this series. So I wanted to give that a little bit of an overview. Oops. Stand by. Okay, so jumping right in right away, this is kind of already assumed that you have downloaded and installed FileMaker. There is a demo version that lasts 45 days you can download, and of course it works on PC or Mac. There's also iOS versions. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with it. Today I'm using a Mac in dark mode using FileMaker 19. But again, the stuff we're going to be doing, especially today, works pretty much on any of the, on either operating system, Mac or Windows, and you should be good to go. So I have FileMaker open here with like the new document splash screen, and then I also have the cover sheet open. I put some dummy information in here just so you can get an idea of you know what kind of information goes into there. But you can download this, again, you can download this cover sheet from the link in the video description. So within FileMaker, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose a blank solution, brand new blank app with 1 table, default fields, and 1 layout. And I'm going to click create. And I'm going to name this, in my case, I'm going to name this 3.1 class. Great. And so right away, not a whole lot going on here. It opened up this database manager. It opened up kind of a blank, boring layout behind us. And it's created 5 default fields for us right off the bat. Great. This database manager is something that's going to be very useful for us throughout all of FileMaker. This is where we actually define our different tables. This is where we add our fields to those tables, and this is also where we define relationships between the various tables that we have in our solution. So right now you see like it created one just called table. I'm going to keep that one. I'm going to rename it. So I've clicked over here on my tables tab, and I'm going to change this one over to be contracts. Change. And I will try to do my best to remember. I won't use a lot of keyboard shortcuts during this. I'll tell you exactly what I'm doing, and over the course of the next couple days, I'll transition more into keyboard shortcuts so you can get used to those. So now I'm going to come back, or I'm going to double click on my contracts database, and you see now it's taken me back over into my field manager here. I'm going to delete a couple of these things just for simplicity's sake today. I'm going to delete creation timestamp, modification timestamp. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm going to delete created by and modified by because I don't need those in this particular thing. I'm leaving primary key, I'm leaving creation, and I'm leaving modification. We might use them, we might not use them, but for now at least, it's good to have them. So the first thing we want to do now is to go through and figure out exactly what fields we need in this table. So the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to look side by side here at the cover sheet and basically just go a field at a time and work our way down and put all of these various things in here. So I've already done this in my answer key solution here, but I'm gonna redo it with all of you. So let's start at the top here. We've got some dates. So we have a commencement date or a start date. I'm gonna do date, and we'll call that maybe contract start. In this particular instance, I like to do, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 or 9 different date fields. So I like to do date and then an underscore before what it is so that in my list, it's easier to find what I want. And I'm going to make sure that the type is just set to text for now. We're going to go back later and change the types, but for now, we want to make sure all these ones that we're making are text. So contract start. Contract termination. I guess we can call that contract end. Great. And working my way down, let's go ahead and do our other dates. So we have a designs due here. Designs due. Tech period starts. Tech ends. Performance, first public performance. And what else do we have? We have date closing. All right, so we've got all those in there. What else do we need? Some of these things we'll leave blank because, of course, we won't know what date the producer signs. We'll know what date the designer signs, so maybe we'll do date designer sign. I think that's all the dates we need for now. There's a couple more we're going to add in later, but for at least getting started, this is good. Okay, so let's look ahead then. So we have design category, scenic costume lighting, sound projection assistant. So this could just be, maybe we'll call this like a meta type because we'll have meta design category. Oops, category. We have the theater company. So this is maybe producer. Name. Producer, let's see, venue. Maybe the name of the theater. Oops, keep doing that. FileMaker fields are not case sensitive, so you can do what works for you. I like using camel case like this after the underscore, but you can put spaces in there. You can do whatever you want. Whatever makes sense for you is perfectly fine. Producer venue, producer number of seats, and we have name of designer. Now, of course, you might say, well, I'm making this for myself. It's always going to be the same. That's fine. I'll show you how to make that automatically work later. But for now, I'm just going to create the field. Oh, we have employer identification number. Yeah, let's add that in there. Producer EIN. Theater, got all those. Okay, so next thing down, we have scope. So we have scenic, lighting, sound, and projection. This basically tells us, is it a single set, a unit set, or multi-set? So maybe we call this show set type. Below that, we have costumes. We say show costume count, or keep maybe number of costumes. Once again, I swear that I can type when I'm not trying to do it live in front of people. Okay. Okay, we got all that. And the next thing is some fees. So we have our fee, contract fee. We have advance of AWC. And I'm going to explain what some of these things are in a little bit for those of you who are not union designers following along. We have fee total. We have, down here we have AWC amount. It's right here. Now this is a closing date, but we don't need a separate field for that because we already have a closing field. So when we go to lay this out later, we'll have, we'll use the same field over and over. And then we have our pension. Call that pension, and then we have one for health. And what else do we have here? We have designer address. Got line 1 and line 2. Designer phone. And email. Okay, so now I basically have every field that exists on the cover sheet put into this table. I did have you create them all as text for now, just for simplicity's sake. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to change the type to be some specific things depending on what kind of information is going into that field. Once you've done this a couple of times, once you're, if you're not totally new to FileMaker, you can do this as you create them. I just find it easier to go through, add them all really quickly, and then go back and change it later on. So if we click back up here on contract start date, if you look at the type, there's a couple of different options here for us. There's timestamp, date, time. They basically are what they say. So date is going to be just a calendar date, November 23rd or 11/23/2020. Time will be a time of day. Timestamp will be a combination of those things. So we're going to change that to date. And I'm going to just go through real quick and change all of my date fields over to that. And this isn't, so depending on how complex you're going to get with your solution, you don't necessarily have to change stuff like this over. If you just want text to show up in the thing with a date in it, that's perfectly fine. You could leave it as that. But where it comes in handy is when we start wanting to do calculations. So for example, later on, we're going to look at things like per diem and calculating how much per diem you have based on when you get to the theater and when you leave. So when you have the fields set as date types, it allows FileMaker to do those date calculations more easily. So that's why we're changing these over. Design category is text, good, good, good. Number of seats, that's always going to be a number. So we're going to change that over. EIN is also always going to be a number. Change that one over. Number of costumes is always going to be a number. Change that. Now, you might say, okay, well, you did, the set type, it's got these little these little check boxes. Costumes also does. Could I make this a text field and just choose from those things? The answer is yes, you absolutely could. I could have 3 options that say 1 to 20, 21 to 30, 31 or more. I'm just going to show you 2 different ways of accomplishing the same thing today. So where this could come in really handy is if you're a costume designer, is if at the end of the year you want to say, how many costumes did I design this year? Having an actual number in all of your contract fields is going to be useful for that, because then I can click one button and say, oh, I designed 600 costumes this year. I don't know if that's a lot. I'm a lighting designer, so you'll have to tell me if that's a lot of costumes. And then anything having to do with fees, those are also going to be number fields. So AWC Advance, totals, just make it a number for now, AWC amount, number. Now, pension and health, this is the first time we're going to start looking at how to do calculations automatically. So if you're not familiar with a union contract, basically what happens is you have a contract fee. So let's just say for simplicity's sake, we're going to do $1,000 fee. Nice, even a 10 number there. The producer is going to pay the designer is going to pay the designer that $1,000 fee. There's different payment schedules and stuff like that depending on which contract you're using, but at the end of the day, the designer is going to get $1,000. Then on top of that $1,000, the producer is also going to pay the union 9% of that fee for a pension fund and 12% of that fee towards an insurance or health fund. So there's no reason that I need to put this information in with each one of my contracts. If I know what my total contract fee is, then my solution should be able to automatically fill out what those percentages are going to be without having to think about it. So if you're not a union designer, you could use this kind of stuff internally for maybe figuring out a kit fee or figuring out, if you do a surcharge or something for health insurance, depending on how you lay out your contracts, you could use the same kind of thing for that. So I'm going to click on my pension here and I'm going to change this over to a calculation. When I click change, it's going to ask me if I'm sure, and now it's going to pop up a new window, and that's going to be our calculation window here. So this is going to be a pretty simple calculation. I know that the pension is 9% of my total contract fee plus my total AWC advance. So I'm going to want this to be 9% of my total field here. So I'm going to come down here and find fee total. I've got fee total times 0.09. So again, this is why we pay attention in math class. We know that 0.09 is 9%. So fee total times 0.09. I put those spaces in there just to make it a little bit more human readable. It will not affect the calculation at all. So you could have them, you could not have them. The other thing I want to check before clicking OK is that the result is going to be a number. And then I also want to go over here under storage options, and I want to click this box that says do not store. So this is if it gets changed later for some reason or something changes about later on, I want it to recalculate that all the time. I don't want it to just calculate once and leave it. So again, number, storage options, do not store, fee total times 0.9. Great. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here for health. I'm going to change this over to a calculation field. And I'm going to say total times 0.12 for 12%. Number. And once you've already done that first one, I guess it didn't. But just going in and making sure that you're not storing it is important. Great. So I've got pension is fee total times 0.9. Health is fee total times 0.12. And really looking at this fee total here, well, wait a second, this is just a combination of these two, of the contract fee plus the AWC advance. That really could just be a calculation as well. So I'm going to change that one over. And this time, instead of multiplication, I'm going to say contract fee plus AWC advance. Just like that. Again, number, do not store. Great. So now the only number that I have to really throw in here is my total contract fee, and it's going to and an AWC advance if you have that, and it's going to automatically then spit out for you a total, and it's then going to use that total to calculate your pension and your health. Now, some people, sometimes I will base my per diem as a percentage of that. I'll base an AWC on a percentage of that. There's all kinds of different options there for what you can get really creative with how you do this. And again, if you're not a union designer and you don't have some of those things, you could start, even if you're not showing the client that number, you could say, okay, if it's $1,000, I know that I have to put 30% away for taxes, so I could make a taxes field. Actually, that's a really good idea, something I should add real quick, and that is going to be a fee dues owed. And dues owed, this is something that the client never sees if you're doing this kind of an agreement, but it's something that I might want to know as a designer. So when I am trying to figure out how much I want to charge for that fee, I'll know how much I'll end up owing in dues after the fact. So I'm going to create a calculation for that. And that's going to be, where is it? Total times 0.02, because we owe 2% of all of our contracts back to the union as dues. Great. Put that up here. Okay. Address, blue, phone, email. So that's pretty good to go on this database for now. I've got some more things that we are going to add in there eventually, but for now, this is a great start. Okay, so that contract table is defined. Let's go ahead and we're going to make our other one. This is going to be called clients. So I clicked on tables. I'm typing in clients, creating a new table, and you see it's automatically created those 5 fields for us already. And once again, I'm going to delete the created by, modified by. You can leave them if you want. And then let's think about what we might need to know about a client. We know we need to know client name. And this one I'm not using the underscores because it's going to be a much simpler. Oops, and I accidentally made that a timestamp, which we don't want. We want that to be a text field. Client name. We could put the venue in there if we wanted to. You know, you could link the venue name to your client. Maybe in a future version of this, we can talk about how maybe you could have multiple venues linked to multiple clients. We could add a venue table. This could really get as complicated as we want it to. But for now, I think we should just leave the theater on the contract side of it and not necessarily on the client side of it. So we have client signatory name. This is the person who signs the contract that would show over here. Signatory email, phone. Maybe we have address 1. And you could even get creative with this too, where you could, instead of just having address line 1, address line 2, you could do, you know, city, state, zip, all that kind of stuff, calculate those all together, use this as a cold emailing solution. You know, I've done that before where, I can click a button and send the client an email from it. Really, the sky is the limit with it. Hey, Sebastian, just saw your thing in the chat there. Okay, so we've got those. What else do we need? Oh, the EIN. Remember I said before I'm not going to put that in on the contracts table because that's something that's specific to the client. So I'm going to say client EIN. That's going to be a number. Oh, wait, did I put it over there? Oh, I did. Well, I'm going to delete it from this one. We don't need it on this one. The EIN always is going to follow the client, so I'm not going to put that in the contract database. EIN. I think that's all I need for now. Name, signatory name, email, phone, address 1, 2, and EIN. Great. Okay, so then the next thing I need to do before I move on to actually working with the data is define a relationship between those two things. So if you remember from the keynote I showed you in the very beginning, we know that key field that's going to match things back and forth is going to be the producer's name or the client's name. So I've clicked over here on my relationship graph, and you can see those two tables that I've made show up, and they have all those fields that I have defined already. So defining this relationship is as simple as finding producer name here, client name, and I guess a better case would probably be to use the same nomenclature for both things, whatever. And I'm gonna click and drag a line between producer name and client name. And now I've told FileMaker that these two tables are related when they have the same client name. Okay, so that's it. I've got two tables. I've defined fields within those two tables, and I've defined a relationship between those two tables. So now when I click OK, you'll see that FileMaker has created for me a relatively ugly looking layout for either one of those things. I have got a contracts layout, and I've got a clients layout. Nothing too special about them. These are just kind of the built-in ones that FileMaker makes for us. I'm going to leave them there. I'm not going to use these in my solution, obviously, because they're really ugly and kind of hard to read. But I am going to. But it's a nice starting point to have. So at any point, if you need to reopen that the database manager, you can get there in two ways. You can go to File, Manage Database, or on a Mac, it's Command-Shift-D, and that will open up. One thing to note is that the database manager does pull focus. You can't do anything else in the program while you have the database manager open, which makes sense because, you know, if I was editing something about this, I don't want, this is kind of like the overarching kind of meta management for the entire file. You don't want to be messing with anything else while you're messing with this. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and create a layout of my own, and that is going to be for putting in the actual contracts into my solution. So to get to my layout manager, it's a very similar thing. I'm actually going to get rid of this cover sheet for now for simplicity's sake. I can go to File, Manage Layouts, or I can do Command-Shift-L, probably Control-Shift-L on a PC. Now this one doesn't pull focus, so I can work back and forth. And you can see here, the two layouts that I have here are the same things that show up in this drop-down list. So I'm going to go ahead and make a folder, and I'm going to call this Data Entry. And make another folder and call it Archive. I'm going to move these other ones into this archive. I'm going to leave them just in case. Maybe we need them for something at some point, but you know, eventually we can delete those. So now within my data entry folder, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new layout. And you see I have a new layout report window available to me here now. So first thing I'm going to say, I want to see records from my contracts database. I'm going to give it a name. We're going to call this Contract Data Entry. And then what kind of device this is going to be displayed on. Is it going to be on a computer, a touch device, or a printer? So a printer, this would obviously be used to print reports and stuff. This, we're going to be just using a computer for it. And we want this to be in a form mode. So there's different ways we can see these things, but for this first one, we're going to be looking at just creating a form. And I'm going to click Finish. So now you see it's opened up for us here a blank layout. It's got parts here. It's got a body part. It's got this top navigation part. If you don't see this field navigator over here on the left, you can do Command K to open and close that. And this basically just allows us to grab a field and drag it in really quickly. It also allows us to see what we have, so I don't have to try to remember what all of my various fields are. I can see, okay, I've added this one. I haven't added this one. And we're actually going to be playing a little bit with styles in this lesson. I didn't do much styling work in my original FileMaker series because there was so much to go over, but I will be doing a little bit of styling stuff with this. So I'm going to be using the Apex Blue theme for this. There are all kinds of built-in styles within FileMaker. To get there, up here on the right, you can click on these three little squares, and it's going to give you lots of different options for different themes. Chances are when you started out, it was under one of the minimalist ones. I just like this Apex Blue one. Again, choose whatever you want. And I'm going to click OK. And now I'm going to go ahead and start defining different parts of my layout. So to do that, I'm going to right click anywhere on it or even off of it. And I'm going to go to Part Setup. I'm going to get rid of that navigation part. And instead, I'm going to put a header there. And really, I need a header, I need a body, and then I want a footer. So again, to do that, I right-click, I go to Part Setup, and I am deleting the navigation. I'm adding a header, a body, and a footer. And those, I think, are pretty self-explanatory as to what they are. A header is going to stay persistent on the top of the thing. The body is going to be your actual content of that particular record. And then, of course, the footer will stay pinned at the bottom. There's all kinds of other layout types that you can use. I would recommend going and taking a look at some of the FileMaker documentation to learn about what those different ones do. We used a couple of different ones in our last class as well. Okay, so then the next thing I want to do is start defining some of the sizes of some of these things. So I can go to View, Rulers to see a ruler, and because this is going to be viewed on a screen, I'm going to leave this as points. If you right click on the ruler, you can change it to inches if you wanted to. We will use the inches later on when we go to lay out our print reports, but for now I'm going to do it as points. And let's just say we'll do 1,000 wide. Maybe the header is 100. And you can click and resize these like this, or you can click over here on like the I don't want to use the word header, but like the header of the header. And then over here under size, you can define it manually. And then maybe the footer as well. Maybe that is, let's say, 75 points. Good. And then the body I'm just going to make kind of big for now because I don't necessarily know how much data I need to fit in there yet. And then let's change over. I can click on the header selector here again, and then in my inspector here under styles, you can see that there are some predefined styles for that theme. So I'm going to leave it on blue because I kind of like that. And then I'm going to add some title text to it. So I'm going to say Mike Wood Lighting Design Contract Management Database. And I'm going to just put this. And you see there's some smart guides as you start moving stuff around there. Of course, that's left aligned, doesn't look that great. But with my style inspector open here, as I click on it, you see now I've got a bunch of text styles that I could choose from as well. And maybe I could find one here that looks somewhat decent. And maybe this large inverted strong looks pretty good. Resize it a little bit. You can think about these style things kind of the way you would think of CSS on a web page, right? So because this text field is linked to this large inverted strong style, if I were to go and change that later, I could make sweeping changes to my entire database. Likewise, like if I didn't quite like this teal color, let's say I wanted to make it maybe a dark purple instead, I could come in here and change that manually. Let's say maybe we'll go... well, let's see. My logo purple is 463F99. That looks kind of cool. And then if you come back over here to style, you'll see there's a red arrow here. So now I can say, let's create that as a new style, and we'll call that purple header. So now if I want to, every layout I make, as long as that header is linked to this purple header, for lack of a better word, class, I change it once, it'll change it throughout my whole solution, which is really great. And maybe I'll do the same thing on the footer. I've got purple and teal in my logo, so maybe that background is my teal color, which is, what is it, 0F75BC. Great. And then once again, I will define that as footer teal. And if I wanted it to be, I could have it the same color as that header. It shows up there just fine. Okay, so I've got the start of a layout here. I got to speed up a little bit. This class is going to run a little bit long. I might have to switch some of this stuff into tomorrow's. Okay, let's move on. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to create some buttons. Before I start putting in data here, let's think about some things that I'm going to need. I'm going to need a add new. I'm going to need a delete button. I'm going to need a duplicate button. I'm going to need next and a previous button. So I'm going to go ahead and create those really quickly. So up on the toolbar here, you can see there's a button tool. I'm going to click on that, make sure it's button, and then all I got to do is click and drag to make a nice little button. And I'm going to define the size of that manually. Let's say maybe 60 by 60. Nice little square button. And then on the button setup window here, we have a couple of different options. The first one, I can put text on the button if I want to. The next one is I can choose an icon for it. And all these other ones are an icon with text in various orientations. I'm actually only going to do the icon in this particular case. And I'm going to choose this plus sign for that one. Maybe I'll make it bigger. And just like we had with our other things, there are styling options for these buttons as well. So when I click on it and I go back in here, I can start looking and seeing what all of those various things are. And maybe I'll do large filled. Put it down here. Kind of cool, but yeah, it's plus. Maybe I want to make it green. We go like a dark green like that, maybe a little bit lighter. Something like that, maybe. Maybe go a little smaller with the icon. There we go. And then again, I can create a new style for this. And we'll go button, add, I should just call it button green. Okay, now that I have that, I'm going to copy paste that a few times. And we'll make this one a duplicate button. This is a good duplicate. And maybe duplicate is, let's see, red would be delete, so maybe duplicate is orange. And we'll create a new style. And this seems a little tedious, I realize, and kind of boring to watch. But once you get it set up the first time, we're going to be able to use these on all of our layouts, which will be super handy. And button red. One thing you've probably noticed is, okay, well, I haven't actually made these buttons do anything yet, and that's perfectly fine. We're gonna get to that in a second. Let's create new style, button red. And the powerful thing about creating those styles like that is now, again, rather than having a button, if I've got 20 layouts with that same button on it, I don't have to recopy paste in the button every single time that I make a change. This way I can make the change once and it will update the color or whatever it is throughout the whole thing. Okay, plus duplicate this. Okay, and then we need a previous. And this one I like that color as is, so I'm just going to leave it. And a last. You might have noticed as I'm doing this, I'm copy pasting by doing Command-C, Command-V. I'm copying it and then I'm clicking up here on the body to paste it. The reason for that is if you copy paste it in place like that, it could make the size of your footer bigger. So for me, it's a good kind of best practice to get into to make sure that when you're going to copy paste something, if you're near the edge of your layout, you copy it, you click somewhere up here, and then you paste it. Again, just a little best practice that I like to use. Okay, so we've got some buttons now. Let's go ahead and make them do some things. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to double click on my plus button. The cool part about today's class is we're not going to write a single script. Everything we do today requires zero scripting. It's all going to be able to be done using the built-in tools. We'll get into some scripts tomorrow, but it's going to be super simple for now. So here under action, I'm going to say a single step. And what I want it to do, I want it to create a new record. So I just clicked on that first line and started typing new record request, just like that. And I'm going to do that for all of these. Single step, duplicate record request, and a final one here is single step, delete. Make sure you choose the right one here. You don't want delete file. You don't want delete all. You want delete record / request. And then this is the first one we've seen now that has another little option with it. It says with dialog on. You can click that to change it from on to off. I'm going to leave it on because it gives me one more little piece of error checking along the way. If you turn it off and you click the button, it will just delete the record, and you can't really undo in any way. So I'm going to leave that dialog on so it'll confirm and ask me, are you sure you want to do this? Click OK. And then these two over here. This is going to be a single step. Now this one, you can't just type in previous. I'm going to say go to record. And then here, where you had that thing before, we could turn it on and off. If you click on it, you see there's lots of different options. First, last, previous, next. So first would be record number 1. Last would be the final one. Previous would be the one right before the one you're on. Next would be the one right after. So I want previous here. And I want single step. Go to record. Next. Okay, so now I've got 5 buttons along the bottom of my page that will allow me to create and modify records and navigate between existing records as well. So now, at long last, it's finally time to go ahead and add some real data to our layout here. Excuse me. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is drag in, let's go back. Maybe I'll do a side-by-side here with our cover sheet again so we can reference and make sure we have everything we need. Close this. That was an interesting zoom there, Acrobat. Thank you. Okay, so what do we want probably towards the very top of our thing? We probably want the show name. You know, we don't have to make this laid out exactly like the cover sheet because there's going to be more information on this available to us than there would be on necessarily just the cover sheet. So we'll do, what did we call that? Oh, show. Did we forget to put... we forgot, or at least I forgot to put a show name, probably, you know, the most important field in the in the thing there. Okay, so I can do this two ways. I can go back into my database manager, or I can actually create a field right here in this field manager thingy. I'm gonna call this show name. Duh. Okay. So now I'm going to click and drag that show name field over into my layout. Just like that. You see it gave us a title and it gave us the box as well. And maybe I'll change this title over to production. We'll call it show name. Keep the nomenclature the same. If I make that a little bit bigger, you see that that box is right aligned, this is left aligned. But what if I want to make them both center aligned? Well, I can do that. I can come over here to my appearance inspector and I can center align. I can do all of that stuff. But before I do that, let's go through our theme and start looking for some different things that we might be able to use that already exist. None of these really speak to me, so I'm going to leave it as default and maybe I'm going to make it myself. I'm going to go center aligned, middle aligned, leave it just like that, and then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to create that as a new style. And we'll call this text box header. Same thing for the field. There's several different previously theme defined field types. I actually kind of like this center aligned one, so I'm going to leave that. And then as I drag this over, you see I can get a nice little alignment tool there. Great. I'm going to put those right here. Okay, so that's kind of the start of our layout. There's, you know, we can go in and drag all these things over if you want. The challenge with that is if I do go over and I start dragging these things in, I'm going to have to redo attributes for a bunch of those things as I do them. What I like to do instead is get my first one defined and then just copy paste it. Because once I've copy pasted it, now if I double click on that field, I can change it to whatever field I want it to be. So maybe producer name would be next. And then of course you do have to manually change this, but it's still way easier than going through and you know, redoing each one manually. That's also why I made this box bigger when I got started, and sometimes I'll even make it the same size as the field, which I probably should go ahead and do. That way I've got plenty of room to work. Okay, so producer name, now we'll do venue. Excuse me. And now maybe next to that we could do number of seats. Producer number of seats. Of course, that could be way smaller. Probably don't have more than, at least the venues I work in, I don't have more than 4 digits in that, so I can leave it like that. Okay. So that's kind of our meta information about the show. Maybe underneath this we could start doing date information. So I'm just going to once again do the same thing. We'll say contract start. I'll change this over to date contract start. And this can probably be smaller as well. That's probably plenty of space. And then I can just come over here and copy paste and say date contract end. Now before I go any further, I want to show you a quick thing. So far we've been working in the layout editor here. I can't actually put data into any of these fields. This is how I actually create the layout. It's not how I add information. To start adding information, I need to be in browse mode instead of layout mode. To do that, I'm going to do Command B. Now you can see it's closed other stuff, and I have these things that I can go ahead and start typing and creating records in my show now. So if I say show 1, create a new one, show 2, now I can navigate kind of back and forth between those things pretty easily. I'll go ahead and delete this. With the start and end times, or excuse me, start and end dates, right now these are just text fields. So I could type in 11/1 or 10/1, 2021, or more realistically at this point, 2023. We laugh because otherwise we'd cry. So I could type that stuff in, but that's kind of tedious. It would probably be better if I could have a calendar picker there, right? So before I go through and start copy pasting all these fields over, I'm going to do just that. I'm going to click on the field, and here on my inspector under data, the very bottom, you can see not there, up towards the top here under field, under control style, you can choose what kind of control that field uses. So I'm going to change it to drop down calendar, and really it doesn't change anything when we're looking at it in layout editor, but when we go back to browse mode, again by doing Command B, when I click on it, now I've got a calendar picker, and I can go through and very quickly add dates. So pretty cool. And then, of course, I can also reformat that date. Let's say if, for those are our friends who don't live in the United States watching this, and you want to reverse it, you could do a custom one. You could have the day of the week, all of those things. Again, this is where, when we defined this field as being a date type earlier, this is where all of that comes into play. Okay, so I've got that in there. I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate that a couple of times. Contract start. Contract end. What else do we have? We have designs due. And I think that, again, if you're not a union designer, most of these, you have all the same dates, so you can easily figure out a good way to use this. You could really get creative and have it automatically create Google Calendar events for you. You could do all kinds of stuff. Text start. Okay, there we go. Tech end. What'd be cool about this is then you could go through after the fact and see how many days you spend in tech throughout the whole year, right? First performance. And that wraps onto a second line, so maybe I just say first performance. And closing. Great, so now I've got a row of dates here. That's useful. Okay, so let's then move on to some other stuff. What's below that? We've got contract type. Let me make sure I'm doing this right on my list. Hey, look at that. I haven't even been looking at my outline, but I'm following the right order. Proud of myself after not doing this in 2 months. Okay, so we have design category next. So I'm going to copy paste this again. Now, of course, if you are only a lighting designer, only doing lighting design contracts, you don't necessarily have to have this as its own field. You could just automatically have it fill in lighting every time or fill in costume every time. I do lighting and sound contracts, so being able to have this is useful. Or if you're trying, and maybe you're somebody watching this who is a producer and you want to make this easier to create union contracts for yourself, then this would be something that could be super useful. Okay, so now if we go back to browse mode again and we look at this, all right, we've got design category. I can type anything in there, but I know that design category, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to be one of these 6 things every time. So wouldn't it make more sense if maybe I could have a drop down and have those categories in there? So I'm going to show you how to do that. Going back into layout mode by doing Command L, and we're going to set up our first value list. So a value list in FileMaker can be one really of 2 things. I'm going to go to File, Manage, Value Lists. create a new one. It can be just an arbitrary list of text that's separated by a carriage return, or it can be based on various entries from fields in a table. So later on, we're going to create a value list for producer name where we could do the same thing and have a drop down for every producer or client that we have in our solution. But for now, I'm going to just manually define a contract categories list. And I'm going to make sure that I put these basically exactly the same order that they're in on my cover sheet. I have scenic, I have costume, lighting, sound, projection, and assistant. Simple as that. Separated with a carriage return, scenic, costume, lighting, sound, projection, and assistant. Click OK. Click OK. And now what I can do, I can click on this box, and same place that we did our calendar thing earlier, we can change that over to be a pop-up menu. And it's going to ask you, where do we get the values from? Hey, look at that. There it is, contract categories. So now when I go back into browse mode and I click on that, it forces me to choose one of those categories. Pretty cool. Sorry, my chair is very squeaky. Okay. So next up, we have these basically our scope questions. What kind of set is it? How many costumes are there? So right away, I'm looking, okay, well, here's three, very specific pieces of data: single set, unit set, multi-set. To me, that says I should do that as a value list as well. So I'm going to go back to manage value lists, and I'm going to call this set scope, I guess. And we'll say single set, unit set, multi-set. Great. And I'm not going to do that with costumes. I absolutely could, but again, I'm going to show you two ways of accomplishing the same thing. So for now, I'm only going to create one for scenic. So I've got design category, scenic or set scope, and we're going to change this over to set type. And again, this is me. I should be using the same words for this. So do as I say, not as I do. Change this over to set scope. And so now when I come in here and I look at this, single set, unit set, multi-set, I've got those options there. And then I'm going to do the same thing for number of costumes. But I'm actually, since I'm not doing a drop down, I'm just going to, maybe I'll do this little guy here. This little dude. Show number of costumes, Cool. And that's just an entry, I enter a number into this field. So let's say 10. Great. So the challenge here, though, is when I do costumes, this set scope is no longer useful to me, right? And likewise, when I do any of these other things, a lighting contract doesn't need to have any information about how many costumes there are in it, but it does need this information. So not only am I'm showing extraneous information, but I'm also kind of wasting space on this layout. So we're going to do some automatic hiding and showing of fields based on this meta category. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to group these things. I'm going to grab these two. Command R is group, not Command G, but Command R is group for those, and Command R to group those. So I have two groups of data here. And then under my inspector, under the data tab here, you see there's a box that says hide object when. So I'm going to click on this, this group that I made, click on hide object when, click on the little edit thing, and once again, I'm presented with a calculation window. So now I'm going to define an instance of when I don't want to see that. So I know that I don't want to see this set scope whenever the meta category equals costume. So it's as simple then as saying meta category equals costume. Great. So again, this is saying when I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it when meta category equals costume. And you can see now I've got a little eye there to show you that there's something there about that. And then I'm going to do the same thing. Now I could come in here and I could say meta category don't show me when meta category equals this or this or this. But an easier way to do that is to use a does not equal operator, which you can find right here. So it's basically just the opposite of what we did before. So don't show this to me when it does not equal. Yes, we've created a double negative there, but it works. Okay. So now when I go back into browse mode, if I change between lighting and costume, you see that that shows up. Just like that. Now, one thing you'll notice is that that 10 is still there. We could create a script that automatically clears that out. Let's say if you clicked on the wrong category type, but that's going to be a little bit beyond the scope of what we're doing today. So for now, we're just going to do that. And then, of course, to save on some space, I could pile this little dude right over top of the other one. So now it changes in place. And if I wanted it to look really nice, I guess I could make the costume, I could make this field the same size as the other one. Doesn't super matter. You get the idea. Okay. So great. So we've learned about value lists. We've learned about field types. We've been doing some style stuff. Let's go ahead and add in some of our fee information to this layout. So I know I've got my contract. Oh, don't want to do it that way. I've got my contract fee. Contract fee. And again, I think the largest one I have is 5 digits for season contracts. So I'm going to leave it, maybe let's say it. Well, we want to leave room for an operator in there, so we'll leave it maybe at 6 or 7. There we go. If you can get a 7-digit contract down here, that would be pretty great, wouldn't it? Okay, so I've got contract fee. And then let's just add a little bit of visual help to us here. So let's say plus. This is, again, just a text box with a plus sign in it. I'll put that right there. I'll zoom in a little bit. To zoom in, it's under View, Zoom In, or you can use Command plus, Command minus. Contract fee plus, come on, there we go. AWC Advance. So for those of you who are not union designers, AWC stands for Additional Weekly Compensation. So on a commercial show, it's money that the designer gets paid every week that the show is running. Think of it kind of like it's basically a royalty in order for the show to continue using the design. So again, like in a commercial world, the longer the show runs, the more money it makes. That makes sense that the designer should then get paid proportionally to that as well. So that's what that is. And a nonprofit, and you can see this on the cover sheet here, which is the vast majority, I think 90% of my contracts I do are all technically nonprofit, even if the company is a big company. That AWC is only due if the show extends. So the way I look at that is like, okay, let's say we settle on $1,000 for this show. I agreed to $1,000 for you to use my work for X amount of time. If now you're going to add a week to that run, I should be getting paid more for that because now you're using my work to make more money. So that's where that comes into play. On some contracts, some larger contracts, there is a negotiation for an advance of that AWC, and it's based on, the rates are all spelled out. It's based on how many weeks there are, stuff like that. So that's where that advance comes in. For most of mine, I don't ever have an advance because it's going to be a nonprofit situation. Okay. Anyway, so then what else we have? We have advance. Maybe we have the AWC amount. What else do we have? We have, okay, and then we'll put our health, our pension, stuff like that in here. Maybe off to the side. That's under what? Benefits, right? Excuse me, benefits, health. The other thing you could do, when we set this up, we hard-coded those percentages into the calculations. but you could create yourself a, kind of like an admin table where, every couple of years those percentages get renegotiated and might go up a little bit. So maybe you have an admin table that that has those percentages in there, so you can edit it if you need to. Or maybe if you're a non-union designer and maybe you want to charge more as like a health premium of some kind, or maybe if you are a union designer and you do non-union contracts too, unfortunately, obviously that's hopefully not the case, but we all know that it does happen. Maybe you can have two different types set up where it calculates one for one, one for another, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Health pension, and then our dues as well. Put that dues in here. Dues owed. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to jump back into browse mode and just test this out. Contract fee, I'm going to put in $1,000. As soon as I click out of that field, that all looks pretty right to me. 2% is $20, pension is $90, health is $120. And of course, right away you notice, well, wait a second, it's just the number. I don't have any operators in there. So to fix that, I'm going to grab all of these fields that have anything to do with money by clicking and holding down Shift. And over here under in my inspector under data, I'm going to format this as currency. And you can even say, all right, I want 2 decimals on each one. You can choose what your operator is, et cetera, et cetera. And now when I go back in here, you see that information's in there, but I didn't make the field quite big enough to fit all of those things in there. So it shows a question mark. So to fix that, I'm just going to come over here and go grab them all and make them a little bit bigger. Kind of realign here. Like that. Maybe I didn't make this one big enough. There we go. Now you get the idea. So if I change this to, let's say, $10,000, let's figure those things out. And as far as the size goes, you'll just have to play around to get what works for you in those boxes based on the contracts you're doing. Something like that. Now, one thing you'll notice, if I go to start typing in this, it's going to tell me I can't, because I can't override that health amount since it's a calculation. So it's kind of misleading to have the box, to have these text field, or to have the container fields like that showing up. So what I'll do instead is I'm going to click on these 3 because I can't edit anything about them, and see, is there a style for, yeah, transparent style. So it shows me a box there just in the editor here. When I go this way, now they just show up. Great, center align that. So now it looks a little bit more like, okay, I know I can't change these amounts. Maybe even the total should probably be the same way, right? Should have this be transparent, centered. And what I'll do, because I know I'm always going to want it centered, I'm going to update this style. Great. Looks great. Let's say there was a $250 advance on the AWC. Oh, good, it calculated all of that properly. Great. All right, now we're cooking. Okay, so what do we need to add in here next? Well, one thing we haven't done yet is figured out, okay, we need to figure out how many weeks is this show running, because that's going to help us determine that AWC amount. Also could just be useful information to have. We need to figure out how to calculate our per diem. How much money are we getting paid in per diem per day, and how many days are we in residence? So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Oh, actually, before we do that, I want to look at one other calculation. No, I lied. We're going to do that first. Okay. So I'm going to open up my my database manager again by doing Command-Shift-D, or going to File, Manage, Database. And on my contracts table, I'm going to add two more date fields. I'm going to add date, residency start date, and a residency end date. Because as we all know, chances are you're not getting to the theater on the first day of tech for the first time, and you're probably leaving after opening. So I'm going to have those two there. Okay. Is that all? Oh, and then I'm going to want another fee. I want fee per diem. Actually, I'm going to change that over to be per diem fee like this, and I'll show you why. Because I also then want per diem total days. Great. Okay, so now back onto this layout here, I'm going to add those fields in. I'm going to copy paste some of the existing formatting that I have here. So per diem fee. Okay, oh, there's another field we actually need. So we've got fee and total days, but we actually probably want per diem total, just total fee as well. And that, of course, will be a calculation. Oops, that'll be, sorry, total fee, create, calculation, and that will be fee times total days. Storing as a number, do not store. Great. So I've got fee amount, total days, and total fee. Okay. Tell you what I'm going to do actually here is I'm going to copy paste all three of these. That'll be times. Great. So now if I say per diem is 120 a day times 10 days, $1,200, 50, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea there. So now let's make this a little bit smarter. Let's go ahead and we know that we have, it shouldn't be a currency field. This should be just a number field. There we go. If we know a move-in and a move-out date, we should be able to calculate this total number of days, right? So let's go ahead and let's add two more date fields to our layout. I'm going to copy paste these. I'm going to say move-in, move-out, residency start, residency end. And now, instead of this just being a regular text field, let's go back to our database manager and let's change that total days to be a calculation. I'm going to change it to calculation. And I'm going to say residency end minus residency start. And the calculation result in this case is a number, which is what we want, and we want this to be unstored. So because we specified that those fields before were date, FileMaker basically figures out and knows what we want it to do at that point. It knows that we want to know the total amount of days between those things. So just like that. And maybe I'm going to change this style then over to transparent again, since I can't edit anything about it. And now let's say I'm moving in today and I'm moving out on Friday. 4 days, $200. What if I was moving out on December 31st? 38 days. Boom, just like that. So real quick and easy way to figure out your per diem. And again, if you're not a union designer, obviously that's super useful for you alone right there. Okay, great. I am running way over time. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get through getting all this basic stuff put in today, and I'm going to move the actual cover sheet stuff till tomorrow's. I think that'll probably be a pretty good use of time. So we'll probably be another maybe 10, 15 minutes today, but I don't want to keep everybody on for a ridiculous amount of time. So we'll get all the basic information put in today, and then tomorrow's session we'll start out by actually putting it into the cover sheet and generating that, because that's actually relatively easy to do once we get this initial stuff done. Okay, Another field that's kind of useful to have, and I find this is just kind of a useful thing when I'm having these conversations with employers, especially new employers who aren't necessarily used to doing union contracts, is how much money is this going to cost them overall? Yeah, it looks okay, $1,000 is great, but now you've got $1,000 plus 120 plus 90 plus all this per diem. Sometimes a producer wants to, if you're having that conversation, what's the bottom line? How much is this going to cost overall? So we can have a field that automatically calculates that for us. I'm going to go back into my database manager, and I'm going to say, let's do producer total cost. And this will be a calculation. And probably see where this is going already. It's going to be total per diem plus health plus pension plus fee total. Again, that's going to be stored as a number. Do not store. Just like that. Producer total cost. Now when I come back in here, not big enough. Maybe you share this information with the producer, maybe you don't. But I find that when you're negotiating and when you're talking about these things, it's also kind of helpful to have that in the back of your mind to know exactly what the producer is shelling out and what they're facing. The more data you have, the more information you have, the stronger of a negotiation you're going to have. So again, like if I change this to something a little bit more realistic, let's say maybe I leave next week. 11/7. Move in today, move out, say 6 days. Now I know that everything all said and done is going to be a cost of $15.10 to the producer. Now, in mine, I also have things like if I'm doing a rental car reimbursement, if I'm doing, if I'm paying for the hotel or the flights and being reimbursed, which I like to do a lot, I'll put that all into that same calculation. But that's a little beyond the scope of what we're doing today. Okay, let me look at my list here. We talked about that. So again, there are, if you're doing commercial work, you can, let's say I plugged in an AWC amount here based on a cover sheet. You could figure that out based on, how many weeks the show is running, all that kind of stuff, and have that automatically populate. Maybe I'll get to that later this week, but you can use the same math that we've done on some of this other stuff to figure out how to do that. Real quick before I move on though, I do want to create one more field. And this is going to be show total run weeks. And this is also going to be then, of course, be a calculation. And this is going to be a little bit more of a complex calculation. So to calculate the total number of run weeks, we're going to say closing date minus first performance. Now, you might say, okay, well, that seems pretty self-explanatory. But then, of course, the question becomes what happens if it's, that's not always necessarily an even number. I'm sorry, that's actually going to give us the total number of days. So if we do, let's say it opens on the 1st, closes on the 24th, we know that it's 23 days. So within this calculation, I'm going to want to wrap this in brackets and then divide by 7. There's 7 days in a week last time I checked. And then, of course, make it a little bit bigger. And you're going to see the problem right away. The problem now is that we've got this weird calculation thing here where it's 3.285 whatever weeks. I'd honestly say 100% of the shows I've done, they're not doing like an extra performance on a Monday or something like that. They're doing it in week, as a week. So instead of this, I want to be able to round this down a little bit. So I'm going to come back into this calculation. And for right now, I'm gonna cut this. So I'm gonna put it on my clipboard, and I'm gonna type in our first FileMaker function that we've explored, and that's the round function. So I'm gonna start typing in round, and you'll see it pop up. Now it's asking for two things: the number that I'm rounding and the precision that I'm rounding to. So precision is gonna be 0 decimal places. And then the number, I'm going to add one more set of parentheses there, and I'm going to paste that original calculation right inside of there. So this is basically saying I want to figure out the total days divided by 7, which gives us the total weeks, and then round it down to 0, down to the closest whole, or excuse me, 0 decimal places. So if I change this to be another week, there we go, now you have 4 weeks. So then again, you could use this field to then calculate what your AWC amount would be on a commercial production. So super, super useful. Okay, a couple more things to show you, and then we're calling it a day for today. Biggest thing I think is going to be a rider. So a rider to a contract, when we do a union contract, this is a cover sheet, right? So the cover sheet is all of the information about the show kind of on a single piece of paper. The actual contract is 30-some pages, and if you notice here, it basically, this first paragraph says that this is essentially the signatory page to that entire agreement. So instead of sending around 30 pieces of paper, we only use this one piece of paper. If there are things in addition to this contract that we want to specify, for instance, again, a rental car budget or special provisions for different things, we add those in a rider to the agreement. So you notice at the bottom here, there's a little checkbox that asks us if a rider is attached, yes or no. So I could create that field. I could say yes or no, or I could have my database solution be smart enough to automatically check the right box if I've added additional terms into my contract. So let's go ahead and add the field for those additional terms. I'm going to open up my database manager again, and I'm going to create a new field called rider terms. Text field, simple as that. And now I am going to make this a nice big old box here. Like this. Something like that. Make sure I retarget this to be rider terms. So now I could come in here and say, theater agrees something like that, right? So tomorrow, on tomorrow's stream, we'll show you how then this would automatically get put onto a rider and automatically check the box on the contract there for that. Okay, the other thing I want to add today is, and this is just more for fun, but we're going to add a show logo. Because I found, whoops, get my caps lock on. Show logo. I think it's, again, visual style is nice. Obviously, there's no place to put it on the cover sheet, but it could go on the rider if you wanted to. And this will be a new kind of thing. This will be a container field, which we haven't explored yet. A container field holds media or documents of some kind. So in this case, it'll probably just be a picture, but it could, in theory, hold, it could hold a PDF. It could hold a music file, anything you want it to. And then here, I'm just going to drop in that show logo onto my layout. Oh, and I just remembered one more thing on the list for today, and then I promise I'll shut up. I'm only about 7 minutes over the time, so not too bad. Okay, so show logo. So I could just grab a picture. Let's grab, let's see, there's a nice little picture of Chloe. I can drop it right in there. And now that show logo is a picture of Chloe. Of course, you'd put your actual show logo there. Okay, and I can create a new one, go back and forth, all of those things pretty easily. Okay, so last thing I want to show you today then, put some more dummy data in here. Just putting in random dates for now. We've got producer name, we've got venue. I'm going to go back over to my, I didn't create a pretty layout for my clients. I'm just going to go back over here to this client's one, and I'm just going to use the one that it has for now. So I'm going to say YouTube Live is a client name. Let's Mr. YouTube. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. You know, you get the idea. And then, of course, the information number. We'll get into that tomorrow. But anyway, I've got YouTube Live as a client name here. I'm going to duplicate that. And I'm going to, the other client will be client Mick. Client face. Great. So I just have 2 clients in here. Again, this isn't a pretty layout, but I've got them in there. Now, when I come back over here to data entry, I want to create a value list that has the values from all of those, the records in that field in it. So I'm going to go to manage value lists. And so far we've done custom definitions of these value lists. Now I'm going to create one that's using those values. So instead of typing in here, I'm clicking use values from field, and I'm saying use values from clients, client name. Just like that. And so now within this layout, I can say, show me a pop-up menu from client names. Just like that. And then if I wanted to, I can actually put in fields onto this layout that don't exist in this current table. So let's say I wanted, let's say once I've associated a client with a particular show, maybe I want their email and phone number quickly visible for me. So I could come in here and I could say, let's copy paste. I could change over to my clients table and I could say client, maybe just say email for now. And maybe we'll make that transparent. And now you see it shows up. I didn't actually change it over on the other one, but you get the idea. It'll show up because we've created that relationship. So you'll see how that's how we'll go in later and add some of these other fields to our cover sheets. So pretty cool. Okay, so if there are any questions from today, I apologize if I got a little rambly at times. I'm getting back into the swing of this now. Again, it's been a couple months since I've done one of these, but I think I'm going to call it a day for today. Tomorrow, we will generate the cover sheet. We will look at also generating other kinds of cover sheets using the same information. So if you're doing a UPA cover sheet, a LORT cover sheet, really, you know, the stuff you're learning, you'll be able to put onto any kind of contract. But I'm just going to cover at least those 3 kinds for now. And then we'll also print a rider. So I think that'll be a pretty good lesson for tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, we'll jump in with actually using this data and looking, okay, you know, how close am I to getting a pension credit for the year? How much am I going to owe in dues for the year? Stuff like that. So again, I'm going to hang out, I think, for a couple of minutes here. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. And otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow at the same time, same place. And there is quite a delay in the YouTube stream. It's at least 30 to 40 seconds today, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is at this point. All right, it looks like there's no questions coming in. So I'll hang out in the chat for a little while. I'm gonna cut the stream. If you do have anything else, you can email me, shout it out on Instagram or in the comments or on the thing, and we'll do more tomorrow. All right, everybody, thank you so much. Talk to you soon.